Hello and welcome in to another episode of the Fantasy Football Forecast. I'm your host, Trevor Scott, joined by my co-host, Matt Giraldi.
What's going on, guys?
And today we're going to get into 6 of our favorite sleepers in drafts. So the first player we're going to talk about today is Ladd McConkey.
Yeah, so first and foremost, Justin Herbert is back at practice this week, which is huge news for, fantasy players as well as for both of us that are Chargers fans. And their season really lives and dies with Herbert's health because Easton Stick is not the answer. And with Ladd McConkey, I would argue that the day he was drafted, he was already the best wide receiver on the team. Obviously, they lost Keenan Allen and Mike Williams last year, which is a kind of a big hit, but obviously aging veterans and especially with Williams had issues staying healthy. Vastly improved offensive line. They've already got Roshan Slater as their left tackle. Took Joe Alt with their first round pick. Just an absolute mountain and just a beast of a player. Obviously, the team's identity is going to be wanting to run the ball more. We know that with Harbaugh offense, but they're not just going to take it out of Justin Herbert's hands. They're going to be in a lot of games maybe where they're trailing or not just completely dominating. So they are going to have to rely on Herbert to throw quite a bit. And I think Ladd McConkey is going to be his top target. Looking back at Georgia, he played 70% outside. His success rate on his route tree was almost all green in the SEC. And for Chargers fans, for comparison, Quentin Johnston's success rate on his route tree at TCU in the Big 12 had a lot of red on it as well. So if that's not something that you look into when you're scouting your kind of fantasy team, just take a look because it is very interesting. And Quentin Johnston's was also all red last year. But like I said, with Ladd, having the chance to be Herbert's number one target, I think that's a really great opportunity. We've seen Josh Palmer kind of thrust into that role in the past just due to injuries. And, I think he's fine. He's not someone that ever kind of jumps off the page at you. And I don't think that, he's necessarily going to be that guy this year. So first sleeper, Ladd McConkey.
Yeah, I think too, something that you didn't highlight that I think is slept on in his game is his speed. I think, he can have the ability from the slot still to take the top off of defenses just because
Yeah.
he's so fast. And I think that's going to also help with his route running, right? If he blows by somebody at once or twice a game, even if it's to set up the other routes that he's going to be running predominantly, the 4.39 speed is something that's significantly faster even than Quentin Johnston. So I really do think that there's an opportunity here for McConkey to really kind of take over the Chargers passing game, similar to how Keenan Allen did target share wise. And, I don't expect him to be as productive as Keenan, but on the third down plays, the really you need to have it here plays, I think McConkey's going to be the target in this offense.
Yeah.
The second guy we're going to talk about is Brian Thomas Jr., wide receiver,
Yes.
rookie wide receiver for the Jaguars.
He was kind of the almost kind of that in betweener in this year's class. So there was kind of the big three that we all heard about, and then kind of that deeper. But Brian Thomas was always kind of that consensus number four. I mean, he's 6'3", 205, runs a 4.33. 17 touchdowns last year at LSU, sharing the field with Malik Neighbors. Again, he would have been the number one wide receiver in the draft class from a year ago. Reports from camp so far is no one can keep up with him at the deep ball. He's just blowing past guys. His movements and the way he bends are just unbelievable. Looking at the Jaguars, they've got 251 vacated targets after losing Calvin Ridley and Zay Jones. And what was interesting in the preseason game was in two wide receiver sets, it was Brian Thomas Jr. and Gabe Davis. I'm not 100% sure this will stand pat for the whole year, but I do think that kind of inspired some confidence for people like myself who, were a little bit farther down on Brian Thomas or maybe just kind of saw him as a potential lottery ticket. But Jags passed the ball a lot. They were, number 6 in team pass plays last year. We know what Gabe Davis's role is, and assuming he kind of sticks in that deep ball route type guy where he's the most successful. He's not a great separator over the middle, so I don't think he's ever going to be a high volume guy. I think there's a decent chance that Brian Thomas is, if not the number one target getter, kind of in that 1A, 1B range. So he's someone I'm definitely pushing up the board. And right now his ADP is wide receiver 47, near Tyler Lockett and Jamison Williams. And we know with Lockett, maybe he's the two, potentially turns into the three on that offense. But we know Jamison Williams is going to be the number 3 target getter in the passing game for Detroit. So at that point, I think for me, it's a no brainer to take Brian Thomas Jr.
Yeah, I really like him as well. I think seeing him be on the field during two wide receiver sets is something that is, uh,
Yeah.
really raises his upside, right? I mean, if he's going to be on the field, even even if it's not 100% of the time, if he's on the field 80% of the time, that's something that I think volume wise will really help him increase his targets. He's also, I don't know if you mentioned the unguardable, right? That was the
Yeah.
news report that we got, is that he's just been unguardable in practice. So, guy that had deep speed. And, he went fourth among the receivers in this class, but that's more because the class was loaded. Like if he had come out last year, he would have been the first wide receiver taken.
Hmm.
I think there's a lot of upside here, especially playing with Trevor Lawrence, taking over Calvin Ridley's role. If that's going to be what he is kind of slated for, maybe he doesn't achieve that super early in the year, right? Rookies take a while to kind of get fully integrated into the offense. But we saw it even last year with Rashee Rice, that once he took over as the number one target recipient in the offense, over the second half of the year, he was really helping teams win. So this could be the case with Brian Thomas. If you do draft him, be patient. Do not
Hmm.
cut him because he's not working out through the first 4 weeks. I would be very, very cautious about that, because if you do cut him, you're going to run into league mates like me and Matt, and we're going to swoop in and we're for sure going to be adding him, and we're not going to cut him again, right? So it's
Yeah.
going to be something where if you do decide to cut a player like this, you're not going to be able to get him back. So just be aware of that too with Brian Thomas. We really are thinking that he's going to be improving in ADP over the next couple weeks here. And if you are able to secure him later in your drafts, make sure you stick with him.
Yeah, that's a great point.
But yeah, the third guy we're going to get into here is Brian Robinson. So I really like Brian Robinson as a player. I really was kind of bummed that Eckler signed there, because I really thought Brian Robinson had an opportunity to kind of step up and be more involved on passing downs, which is something I don't think is going to be the case this year now. However, I do think that he is going to be playing predominantly on early downs. At first, I thought kind of Eckler was going to take over and be kind of the main player, and they were going to have, Brian Robinson maybe have 10 to 12 carries, not much work in the passing game. But all the reports out of camp are that Brian Robinson is going to be the starter, that Brian Robinson is looking good, and that he's been working well on goal line. He's been working well on early downs. So now I'm starting to think, well, maybe if the Commanders are going to be running the ball a lot, maybe it's Eckler getting 8 carries in the passing game work, with Brian Robinson still able to work his way into 15 carries on a weekly basis. With maybe one, two, maybe 3 targets a game on early downs. I don't really expect him to be involved at all, really, though, in the passing game, with Jaden Daniels being a rushing quarterback and they have Eckler in that role. So I wouldn't expect much more than, maybe 30 targets on the whole season. So this is mainly a play for your starting lineups when needed during bye weeks or injuries. Somebody that should see early down volume and somebody that should have a decent opportunity to score on any given week. You can possibly be plugging him in against weak rushing defenses. And if he gets hot and they get ahead late in games, he could be their closer on the ground. So somebody that we saw last year go really late in drafts and was basically a starter all year long. He finished as running back 22. So he was definitely productive enough to be in starting lineups. And so I kind of am getting that same feeling again, because or his ADP in Superflex leagues is getting pushed down into the 120s. And in 10-team leagues, that's, in your 12th round. And in 12-team leagues, that's in your 10th round. Like, I really think that at that point, when he's going to be one of your top bench players, this is the type of guy that is just is going to be very valuable, that what his role is going to be, and that he is going to be able to not give you zeros when you need somebody.
Yeah, I tend to agree with getting the early down work. I tend to agree that he's going to get the work on the goal line, because even though Jaden Daniels is a rushing quarterback, he's not going to be Josh Allening guys in the end zone. He just doesn't have that physicality. My fear with Eckler is, last year, he had that high ankle sprain, which just completely zaps the athleticism. So if he comes back fully healthy, we know maybe he's not prime Eckler, but he's still only 29. So there is that chance that he regains that form. Anthony Lynn is the run game coordinator. They obviously have, history together. There's just a few. Plus, they paid Eckler, I want to say, $4 million for this year, which isn't nothing. So for me, there's just too many question marks. And like you mentioned with Jaden Daniels, I think dumped it off to his running back last year, like 6 times or something. Like it was
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
So
He's not doing
I
that.
yeah, so I do get what you're saying, and there's a couple things that I do like. There's just too many question marks for me at this point. But like you said, where he's being drafted, like I do understand, wanting to take a shot.
Yeah, 126 again. We're talking sleepers, right? These are guys
Yeah,
that
yeah.
have a
This isn't
solid
your
chance to
second rounder.
outperform their yeah, to outperform their ADP, right? And
Yeah,
somebody that's going to be getting 15 carries and that is as dynamic as him on the ground, I could see a lot of 60 to 70-yard rushing games, and if you plug him into your flex on the week he scores a touchdown, you're looking at double-digit points from somebody that you're
yeah,
getting super super late, somebody that, you take somebody else that could be an easy cut later in the offseason. So from that perspective, right, that's what we're talking about with Brian Robinson.
yeah.
The fourth guy that we're going to get into is Jerome Ford, another one of my sleepers. I've been kind of touting it all off season that I do expect Jerome Ford to be one of the best, if not the best, zero RB target. I don't think Nick Chubb is going to be ready for the first 4 weeks. I think he's going to open on PUP. And even when he is back, I don't know that how much of a role they're going to give him right away. He suffered one of the worst knee injuries you possibly can last year. He's 29 years old, and he already doesn't take a lot of the passing down work. So for Ford, right, he should continue to keep his passing down work, and the Browns love to run the ball. So if Chubb does come back and is getting 15 carries, I don't think that that's necessarily going to put Ford in a position where he's not going to be ownable. So like you're getting him down, in the low 130s for ADP outside of the top 40 at running back. And I think that when with a week 1 rankings come out, you're going to have drafted him. He's going to get ranked 27 on whatever site you see at running back. He's going to have 40 yards on the ground, 20 through the air, and a touchdown. And everybody's going to be like, why didn't we draft more of Jerome Ford? This offense looks good. He's involved in the passing game. And so even if it's one of those things where you pick him, you're able to start him through the first 4 weeks with confidence, and then, you kind of figure out what role he's going to play on your team after that. At this draft price, he is just too good to be passing up.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, to be honest. And we could see a situation where, when Chubb does come back, similar to how JT and Moss were still both sharing a lot of the playing time. And there's no guarantee when Chubb comes back that he's going to be back to his old self. Like you said, it was just a brutal injury. He's got age working against him. Yeah, I like Ford quite a bit.
Yeah, and there's the what if too on the upside case for volume. There's the what if Chubb comes back and they ease him in, and then he's being an effective player on his 10 to 12 to 14 to 15 carries, and they're still giving Ford 10 to 12 to 14 carries with 3 or 4 targets a game, that, Ford just stays relevant all year. So again, not probably likely, but there is that chance. All right, so then the fifth player we're going to get into today is Jakobi Meyers. So another one of my sleepers here. I just can never figure out why he goes so low. I mean, he's getting drafted ADP 143. He's going outside of the top 40 at wide receivers, and he finished as wide receiver 21 last year. And that was also with terrible quarterback play. Like the quarterback play was not good for the Raiders. They got Gardner Minshew, who should be improved on Aiden O'Connell. And if they have to bench Minshew for O'Connell, I would say that he's going to be playing at a higher level than he did last year. So, just in weeks where you could take advantage of the matchups, he's going to score touchdowns too. In weeks where maybe there's really good cornerback on the opposing team that's going to take Devontae out of the game more than he otherwise would be, Jakobi can play in those situations. And the other factor here for Jakobi that I feel like is not being baked into his ADP at all is Adams is getting older, and I think there's a chance that if they're not winning, they could move on from him at some point in the year and decide to trade him, like say to the Jets, or trade him to a contender. And if they do that and you have Jakobi Meyers on your roster, you're going to be getting a top flight target getter at pick 143. It makes no sense to me. I cannot figure this one out. I try and get Jakobi Meyers on every single one of my teams that I draft. If I am doing mock drafts, I basically am passing on him to see how late other people pick him, because I don't have any problem pushing him up into flex consideration. Like Deontay Johnson is going ahead of him. Are we really sure that he's on a better offense? Are we really sure that he's going to be more productive than somebody like Jakobi Meyers? I'm not, and I have them ranked relatively closely. So To me, I really think Jakobi Meyers is somebody that needs to be moving up draft boards and is somebody that should be a focus of every team that you draft.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing you said was, if Devontae gets traded, I'm trying to get Jacoby on almost all of my best ball teams just for that reason because
Yep.
like you said, people just I don't know if they're just bored with him or they don't look at previous year's success, whatever it is. Obviously with the addition of Brock Bowers, I expect, him to get a lot of volume too, but at this price point, like yeah, let's just take a really good player that could turn into a number one if Adams takes off.
All right. And the last player we're going to talk about here, our sixth sleeper, one of Matt's sleepers for this year, is Ja'Lynn Polk, wide
Yeah,
receiver for the Patriots.
Yep, Ja'Lynn Polk, second round pick out of Washington, was part of that three-headed monster at wide receiver on the team that went to the national championship last year. Played 70% of his routes out wide. He can play in the slot as well. He's got great hands, doesn't shy away from contact at the catch point. Really, really tough physical football player, even though he's only 205, but he is, 6'1". Looking at the depth chart of wide receiver for the Patriots, it's pretty grim. So Pop Douglas, we know, is their slot receiver. But he's undersized. He doesn't win against man coverage, has an okay success rate against zone. Pop's probably going to be off the field in three wide receiver sets. But Kendrick Bourne tore his ACL in week 8 last year. The reports, it's funny because some of the beat reporters have been calling Ja'Lynn Polk like a faster Jakobi Meyers, which I think is good to hear from those guys that are kind of up close and personal. We know that Patriots were very abysmal last year, but they've got a new OC. They brought in Jacoby Brissett, who, may not be the best quarterback in the league by any stretch of the imagination. And at some point, if Drake May breaks his way onto the field, then, there's a good chance that, like I mentioned with all these other guys that I've talked about, I'm looking for value late of guys who could potentially be the team's number one receivers. And I think Ja'Lynn Polk fits that mold. And right now he's ADP of wide receiver 69. He's going between Michael Wilson, Rashad Bateman, like give me the upside of a young potential number one receiver. Not someone I'm going to be plugging into my starting rosters week 1, 2, or 3, but if you can be patient with him, I think there's a chance that this, works out or at least highly outperforms his ADP.
I love Ja'Lynn Polk as a sleeper. We saw Douglas do well in the number one role, even in a really bad offense last year for multiple weeks in a row. Obviously, that didn't last, but if you're getting anything out of your last round pick, and if it does turn into anything consistent, even if the volume is just consistent, if he's getting a 25% target share on the offense week over week from bad quarterback play, that's still somebody that you want on your roster. So I do really like the call of Ja'Lynn Polk.
Yeah, and I think one thing I like to think about too, because some leagues Polk might not even be drafted. Like when you're going into your draft, think about guys that could be potential waiver wire priorities in the first 2 weeks. Like, is this guy potentially going to be a number one target getter? Like, just try to think through that. And for me, I could see a scenario where if he does go undrafted and he's the clear number one, people are just rushing to the waiver wire to get him. So always kind of be thinking about that. I know we've got a lot of drafts coming up the next couple weeks, so exciting stuff.
Yeah, and also somebody that could be increasing in value, right? You get somebody that has a good week early and then could increase in value from there. Why take Ezekiel Elliott, right? Like he's going way before a Ja'Lynn Polk, multiple rounds ahead of him. But like for me, I mean, there's going to be maybe volume there, maybe some Rico Dowdle competition, and why not take a shot on somebody that has significantly more upside than that later in your draft? That's just how I would look at it as well. So. Agree with you there. And with that, those are our 6 sleepers for the 2024 season. We may or may not be coming at you with another video similar to this with some other names, maybe go even deeper than we did during this video. And we look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thank you.
Later.